podcasters fell into the murky depths of the rabbit hole. Now they must fend for themselves. Join Chantelle and Mike Wing as they navigate the abyss. Right here, right now, on the Falling Down the Rabbit Hole podcast. Thank you so much to me for that wonderful introduction to the podcast. And welcome everybody to the Falling Down the Rabbit Hole podcast. I am joined today by my esteemed co-host, Chantelle Painter. Chantelle, hello.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
I am as good as the day is long.
Oh, only 24 hours?
That good.
Well, that is wonderful. I'm glad to hear that. And we have a wonderful guest today named Laura Penner. Laura, would you like to tell the audience a bit about yourself?
Let's see. So I kind of do advocacy. So I've been involved with the provincial NDP going back since I was about 16 over in Saskatchewan. Then I moved over to Alberta and been progressively involved in Alberta NDP and the federal NDP down there. And it came to the point where I joined the Disability Caucus and had the wonderful opportunity to be a co-chair. And since then, I've just been doing disability and LGBTQIS advocacy.
That is amazing. I've known Laura for a while now through the Disability Caucus. I just want to preface this by saying to everybody that this is not a political podcast. And I want to make that clear because I don't want people to stop listening because we're talking about like provincial politics. If you're from the US and you know who Donald Trump is,
we're sorry.
Provincial government in Alberta is, I would say they're a tiny bit better than Donald Trump, but not by much. Would you agree with that assessment?
I definitely agree, but at the same time, comparing Canada to America is very low bar, and we should strive to follow the words of Tommy Douglas. Also, another thing, I do have some family down in America, but they're all Trumpers, so a little bit less sympathy.
You know where they say you can find sympathy in the dictionary. For all those who don't know, it's between shit and syphilis, just so we're clear.
I'm actually really lucky because most of my family is Democrat, except for a couple. And I say that in Canada and in the States. So, when we visit each other, it doesn't turn into angry fist fights or anything. So that's kind of nice.
My mom's slowly gone more progressive over time, but I know my dad is definitely still conservative. PPC kind of conservative, like part of my family's like that. So it's like, I always joke, I was like, hey, I have a family full of, some neo-Nazis.
Every family's got them, you just gotta find them.
Chantelle, did you want to talk about what you found?
Yeah, I will talk about my rage farm from earlier this week, just to give sort of the conversation direction and context. So I too do quite a bit of advocacy and business influence type of work. And I will tell you 100%, I was appreciative of the very nice gift I found in my email inbox, and was excited at first because it said it was a diversity and inclusion initiative by the CFL, and I am a huge CFL fan. And when I went on to read it, it was not. It was. I hate. Okay, so here's the platform of my anger towards performative allyship. People who take out billboards to say we're decent human beings are very rarely decent human beings. And so this is why I absolutely was over the top screaming at everybody, kind of mad to see this article that says we aim to include people by initiating a very small 1 month job experience, underpaid, during the worst, most chaotic time in the CFL during training camp, and we want a high five for it. And I was not happy. I went off the deep end. I was like, this is the biggest bullshit in the world because it does nothing to actually change the system.
Mhm.
And so it seems funny that almost everything I've seen this week, and I fully believe because it's been top of my mind that I'm finding things, related, but I was looking at some company policy where, they say we are LGBTQ friendly. Now, A, they're not using the full term. Is what it is. B, I've known people who work there. No, you're not. Or at least your managers are not. The people who work there are not. And your policies are not. So you can say that, yes, we'll take your money. And this is more from like a commercial point of view. But yes, we'll take your money because, we want to show that we on paper respect people. But when it comes down to the things you actually do, you're not doing anything. You're not doing anything. You want a high five for doing nothing. And that enrages me now.
Yeah, like it's a thing where I've even seen, like, in a similar experience, it's like I've seen some companies and even like sports leagues have rules, regarding trans people, and I've seen some people pitch trans leagues, which is absolutely messed up, because if you're a dude, you should be on a dude's team. You're a woman, you should be on a woman's team. Because as it is with the current hormonal system too, they also mess that up all the time. And so to see them saying they're LGBTQ friendly, except they don't even give people the common courtesy to be on the teams that they wish to be on and feel comfortable on.
No, and I think that's it. I have always been, I was raised by a dad who was equally as much of a feminist as any other feminist I've met, but who was always really, really concentrating on, he's just saying, I'm from Missouri, the show me state. Don't talk, don't say, I don't want to read anything. I want to know who you are by what you do. And to me, like, integrity is huge like that. And that doesn't stop at individuals, although it's, I can choose to surround myself with people who are decent human beings in the way they are. And that, that I have control over. But it's the amount of research you sometimes have to do, or the conversations you sometimes have to realize that these people who on the surface are super awesome, or in their ads are super awesome, or in what they say is super awesome, but to exactly your point, they don't do anything that's awesome. They exclude, they have fear, they don't ask questions when appropriate. They're, all of the doing parts, all the things that are necessary to have that culture be a real thing and not just something you say, you have to do the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing the thing, which is ironic, especially from a sort of a business point of view, the doing the thing is usually the least expensive. Like, the being decent human beings literally cost nothing, versus, for me to put a pride flag on my ad, or say, we accept all people as they are. Those are really nice, again, words, or people who choose to end their employment ads with like verbatim the legal requirement of Ontario. That's nice. Like, oh, I'm so glad that you've taken the time to cut, copy, and paste. But have you made any motions in the process that ensure those things? Or did you just like, no, this is like the legal minimum requirement, here I go?
Well,
like, that's good enough.
And I also firmly believe in, like, in a business area, I'm not a business person, but like for me, I'm kind of a belief that, hey, even if I have to do the right thing and it costs me some money, I'll do it, as long as it doesn't bankrupt a business, because you need a business to survive to keep doing those good things, right? But at the same time, if it's going to bankrupt you because you're a bad business and you're built on bad practices, absolutely should. That's called capitalism.
Well, and so, I mean, outside of my 9-to-5 job and more inside of what I do outside of that makes any sense. Like, no, I spend my time preaching to businesses that, it might to actually live a culture of inclusion. It might cost you $5 right now, when doing nothing might cost you one. You might buy pizza once a week. That isn't inclusive, and I don't think it really drives morale, but you can do that and say you have employee functions that you cater events. Those are all true. But in the long run, it is not going to help your retention. In the long run, it is not going to have lasting impacts on your culture. In the long run, you may still continue to make money as a business, but you will never make as much money as if you actually employed practices that reflected your business culture that you want to have, that you have on paper, that you promise your stakeholders in those pretty little annual books that come out, that, you know, to the people who spend and have millions of dollars invested in a company, and to put those words in there that our people are a priority. That is absolutely brilliantly nullified. It is absolutely shit provoking.
Oh.
You know, if you actually took $5 more and did the thing, you may make $5 less now, but you are going to be making an extra 20 later. You are going to be ahead of a curve when all of a sudden what is considered, you know, societal change today is just a minimum exception tomorrow. And the population will see you try to catch up. Anyways, that's another.
And to your point too, right? It's like even in the CFL, like minority players and female players, they all make way less money than their male counterparts, and also they discriminate against trans women too, and trans men. So they don't care about any minorities in the traditional sense. They also pay women who are about still a minority, but about half the population, way less than men. Because you see it, it's like a woman might be getting paid still a lot for sport, maybe like $200,000, but when you see a dude getting paid about $1 million or more, which is absolutely not cool.
No one's making $1 million in the CFL, but yeah.
Well,
no,
I don't know as much.
No, that's okay.
NFL, but like it's still a lot of money.
Yeah, no.
Most people.
And the disparity still exists, exactly like it does in every other industry, if not more.
Couple of things I wanted to add. I think that there's two specific examples where I have seen the stupidity of the kind of promotional thing. Number one, I was applying for a job. I won't say what it was, but I was applying for a job, and it was for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the whole thing talked about how they cared so much about diversity and equity, and they wanted to, you know, make sure that they were inclusive in the hiring process and all that stuff. And right below that, it listed all of the qualifications that you needed to be a DE&I specialist. And it's like college degree. It's like 10 years experience of DE&I. It's like, that's not inclusive, people. I'm sorry, but it's not.
No, I was going to say, if they want to make it inclusive, you know, I would argue no degree should be required. But if they want to have one requirement, a bachelor's, that's it.
Yeah. And the other example is around accessibility. I have seen really good companies and organizations that I've worked with grew up so badly on their accessibility. They will claim that they had somebody with a disability check out the accessibility, and then they'll have a little lift in their building which somebody with low hand function can't use.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, did you really have somebody with a disability come and check, or were they not in a wheelchair, or?
But firsthand experience on that, man. I will tell you the amount of times that I have been like, oh, you've had somebody walk, say, your recruitment process, your physical environment. How many people? If you answer anything less than like 50, you're like, what? Okay, so I mean, I've been caught in this too, 100%. You know, I've gone to the people I know to ask for solutions, say for text to speech translation. I have gone to, you know, to say, okay, what is the best, you know, either technological sort of solution for this, or what phone system works best with this, what app works best with this. And I think it only takes you so long to realize that if you ask the same people who experience the same barrier, the same question, you are never getting the same answer twice. Ever, regardless of whether it's physical, regardless of whether it's cultural, societal, everybody, there's no one size fits all. Oh my God. And so a lot of people say, like, oh yeah, we've had our system checked. Good. I'm sure you did, sweetheart. Like, but how much effort did you go through, or how many people did you have walk it? I've worked with companies where, bless their heart, they've said, we've been on this journey for a year and we think we found everything. And I laugh and I laugh and I laugh some more. And then I call them on their bullshit, because you can't. This is a journey. Everything is a journey. And so you can't say like, oh, we figured everything out in a year. I'm like, yet to Mike's point, yet in your search for a DE&I specialist, you want no less than 10 years experience. Therefore, you can't suck and blow. You either acknowledge that this is a long-term knowledge-filled trough of information, or you're like, we did a thing. We want you special.
And I would also argue, right, if you have someone who has firsthand experience, like they're actually part of those communities, it should be a lot less, experience that is required. Because one of the things that I like advocating for is, if you're going to have a position regarding any group, say it's trans people, you want to have a trans person in charge of that thing, right? If it's queer people, you want to have a queer person, regardless of their other, identity, as a part of that as well. And then you want, if you're in the disability community, someone actually has a disability, be it mental or physical or both. Like, that is a common practice we should have. If it's like, for example, in the case of our government, you have Ron Orr, who is Minister of Women. You actually want a woman for that position, actually, unless he's secretly trans, in which I don't know why he doesn't just come out. It's for another discussion.
No, but that is exactly it. I mean, there's outrage right now. If any film company casts somebody who is either not of the ethnic origin of the character, or who is a person without a disability pretending they have that disability. And I do like that it's now recognized that, hey, you should be casting people in those roles who live that. I don't care how good of an actor you are. There's still nothing that lived experience that can replace that lived experience. So there's so much outrage. It's national news. And yet when a company, like you said, like, wants somebody to head up an Indigenous program, or a trans program, or a disability program, and where the options are there, and they are, because they can't say, well, nobody who has a disability is applied, nobody's trans is applied. No, then go find those people. Then you're not hiring correctly with,
would say that. Most people would say that. Could have probably had an experience with me and not even have known, because I met so many people like that, and they just don't even ask.
No, and I get it, and I have sympathy where you don't feel comfortable. You have to, in order to grow, you have to be uncomfortable, and that includes asking a question about, how should I go about doing this? I'm in a job right now, like my 9-to-5 job, where I've spent the last 4 months going, I am scared of screwing this up. Please tell me how to talk to you before I talk to you, and not screw this up, because I respect you.
I also let people know that in my work too. It's just a difference. Everyone there who is working with me is like a friend or a best friend level of relationship at this point.
Right. Yeah. And I wish there was the outrage. Not even the outrage, just a notice of, this is not important only when it's on television, not only important when it's on a tabloid news thing, not only important when it's going to get 1 million clicks. These things are important in your day to day. I know it's not sexy. I know it's boring, whatever, but do it. Not only is it the right thing to do, but something ROI.
You know what? It's one pet peeve of mine, at least in the past few years, with the rise of acceptance in the queer community at the same time, though, is, while I love acceptance of the queer community, a lot of it has been driven by the drag genre for some weird reason. And, like, again, I don't think that's a bad thing, but the thing is, like, lots of people I've seen actually mischaracterize drag people with trans people, when it's not the same thing. Like, I look good naturally. They dress up for a weekend. There's a difference, because one is a show, one isn't. One's actually.
Wait, I just wanted to jump in. I've been trying to think of the name of the show, because I wanted to bring it up. And if going back a little bit, I apologize. But have either of you seen Atypical on Netflix?
I've seen a few episodes. Personally, I didn't really like it, because when I look at acting for anything, you want to just have the actors act as if they would in a normal setting, if they're supposed to be character acting in their own body, pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. And my aunt and my aunt really liked the show, and we were talking about the show, and I said, "Oh, well, that's great. So the main character is played by somebody with a disability, right?" She said, "No, no, it's not."
Mhm.
So, and the reason apparently that it is not played by somebody with a disability is, and this is not my words, this is what the creators of the show have said. Some of the things that they had the person with autism doing, the character with autism doing, the actual autistic community would not be capable of doing. Don't yell at me in the comments. This is not me saying this.
No, but
I totally
But
disagree.
what did the character do? Because I was gonna say, I'm high functioning. I can do pretty much anything a normal person could, if not more.
That is exactly.
Like that's why I'm so confused on that.
I feel like if somebody with autism can't do what the character in the show is doing, maybe the character in the show shouldn't be doing it.
do you think,
Time.
but to draw parallels from both the example of the show and the example of drag, do you think, and this is something that I've always just, drag has been public and open for years and years and years and years. The thought of actors portraying something is comfortable. Both those things are, like, granted, maybe not completely mainstream, in society, but they are acceptable fringe norms. And I think it's what I love hate, again, in an effort to say, these are conversations we should have every day. These are things that occur in society and should be normalized. These are things that, we should just be intrinsically doing. If, like, they're sort of stopping or getting stuck in these sort of platforms which are comfortable for them and saying, oh, well, instead of creating a show with, say, based on somebody with autism, and then having that person, actual, like, build the story around that, like, in reverse, not try to write something for someone who may or may not exist, especially with something as, like, broad as a spectrum of autism. It it broad. But
Yeah.
and the same thing to be said about drag. Again, you're trying to make yourself feel comfortable, and so the closest thing to transgender, because the primaries, you see somebody who maybe is biologically one sex but dresses it as another. Oh, well, I know that's drag. Not, again, and it's maybe uncomfortable for an individual to go, no, they're different, and here's, like, very specifically
And
how.
I feel a very inherent kind of thing, because for me, it's a bit more interesting, because there are times where I get uncomfortable if somebody even refers to me as trans, right? Because I identify with the trans community, I advocate for them, but in my daily life, I think the goal of me is what most people want. Some people are fine identifying as trans, but I just want people to recognize me as a girl, right? I'll actually give a very good example, which is like Bumble, right? You can put down on your main profile when people first click on you that you're a woman, but when you both match with each other, it shows that you're trans, and same with the other person if they're trans too, to make sure that people are safe when they match, but also that it's keeping away turfs.
I see. Yeah, that's really good. By the way, what is a TOEF? I heard that term recently, and
Trans exclusionary radical feminist is the typical term. Those would be like your J.K. Rowling kind of types.
Mhm.
The wicked witches that just hate everything and want to see the world burn.
Yeah. No, and it is super hard, not, like, for me not to get defensive in a way. Like, I always feel that if something, just broadly, regardless of topic, if something hurts you so immensely that you want to explode right away, or makes you feel so secure that you're like, hot damn, I am 100% right and I will fight you for it, that is the time you should say nothing. Either those times, the times you should say nothing. Because sometimes, I would say I've experienced where, if I'm coming out and being, like, ultra feminist, because I am, and then all of a sudden, either a male who doesn't know and who is, like, using turf as a, they just obviously do not know, because these are also guys who are probably, like, trolling trans people, like just the archetype. And then, so I really sort of take that personally, but in that moment, I'm like, am I being so exclusionary that I'm giving off this vibe that, it's everything is black and white, which I hate that sort of place to be.
Not everything is black and white.
No, it isn't. No, and that's why I hate when all of a sudden I'm like, have I said something that is so black or white? Or have I, because again, if I want to punch you in the face, there's probably something I'm feeling that's unresolved.
But at the same time, I will give like a parallel, right? Which is like, again, like the radical feminist kind of thing. Whereas it's like, if you're a feminist, you fight for all women, right?
Yes.
And like the whole thing I always give example of, and I've even lost friends in the past over it, is the meaning lesbian. Like, because like I've had people say, oh, hey, I'd have to be pan to date a trans person. Those are people I just don't continue being friends with, right? So because I've heard people say that before, if you're a lesbian, that means you like women and femininity. That's the whole point of it. It's part of the meaning, the definition.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't understand why people decide to just be all weird and bigoted about those things.
Fear and lack of knowledge. Like, that is the only, when you do get somebody who says something that is like, oh, you honestly just don't, like, either it's so utterly contradictory or so just hate-filled that you're like, you have, what you're saying, that word does not mean what you think it means.
Mm-hmm.
And then so that when you do find somebody who is not so guarded and so I'm right and is willing to converse about where the idea like where their specific viewpoint comes from, 9 times out of 10 it's been out of like okay, we need to get back to fundamentals. Can we I mean, when it comes to, say, the queer community, all right, we need do you need definitions, like, and not in a condescending way, but the words you're using aren't representing the people you're talking about, and what you're talking about actually doesn't even connect, like gender and sex, like that. How I think that's probably the most, again, of the experiences I've had, those are the two sort of big overarching umbrellas that people like to put into one umbrella. And so that prevents a lot of the definitions from even making sense if that is only one umbrella for you instead of two.
I think I almost broke my parents' brain because when I came out, before I came as trans, a couple weeks before, I said I was gay. I was, just in a different way.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it was just so funny having them be like, oh, are you straight? And I'm just like, no, I am not.
No, and I think it's like, I mean, obviously I've known Mike a little bit longer than Laura, but there is no fear when you find the right people to ask the right stupid questions, like. And so I think we each need like a friend who's like, yeah, you're dumb, let me just educate you in the nicest way and not condescendingly, but at least more places for that to happen.
I'm fine talking.
People live in their bubble. Yeah, well, exactly. No, and I think, a whole other podcast would be on respectful discourse when you disagree. I think we just don't have a lot of that anymore.
Where, again, if I'm going into you, talking with you, and you're conservative, and there are certain things you just won't back down on. There are things where it's like, in a normal day-to-day thing for mental health, that's just where I cut off relationship, because
for sure.
Say, for example, even the idea of someone wanting to privatize healthcare at this point would actually probably be a deal breaker for me.
No, and it is those things. It's funny how, again, I guess this is maybe from the different viewpoints that people would have been brought up, and we're in a really rigid Western society of systems that are concrete until they're not, but then they will turn to other concrete systems, and it really doesn't do much for like thought outside of the box. It's really like I really, really love football. I heart the Elks. They might have the shittiest team right now. I might think their coach is a hot garbage as a human being. I love my team, and they're going to win. And if they don't win, well, they'll win next time. And if they don't, they'll win next time. And if they don't, they'll win next time. And I love my Elks, and I love the players, except if they're assholes. And I love them. I do not love a politician. I 100% sit on committees and I do volunteering and I am a loudmouth for rights and policy. But hot damn, I am a policy freak. And I have, especially on a national stage, and I will admit this freely, that Jagmeet Singh, bless his heart, seems like a decent human being. But the amount of times I have been like, get off the hate bus, come up with some policy and be better. Or don't complain that there's no change when you hold the balance of power in the house.
What I was gonna say is, I think
stop.
It's like a lot of Albertans have this criticism, because we've been hearing this too. Is like, we need to have more of a mix. I honestly feel, because we need to say, hey, pardon my French, hey, those policies are shit. Now, why are they this bad? Like, how can we fix it from this point onwards? Yeah. Here's our plan to fix that, right?
Yeah.
It's like, for example, affordable housing or like healthcare. We should actually make some moneyed commitments. Like, we have commitments on hospitals, but we should have some money commitments to staff training. I would even argue, if you get good enough grades, your schooling should be entirely paid for, not just by scholarships, but just by the government, just to make things easier for students applying through things. And we should also have other incentives, such as, discounted rent in major cities for, hospital employees.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Those are all policies, though. Those are all, it's so bad right now where it's like, I hate individual leader. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, that's nice. I don't like any of the leaders right now enough that any leader of any party right now is nobody I would have in my home. Bless all their hearts. They might be decent human beings, but they're all politicians at heart. And for me, politicians at heart, I have a little sore spot. I'm sorry. It's like religious leaders. It's just like, I don't connect. Mm-hmm. But you put so much time and effort into a person that I have seen some of my conservative friends' minds explode. They have become eternal black holes and they do not know what to do with themselves, and their identities are crushed because they've always voted party A, but the leader of that party is a right-wing fucking nut job. And you're like, holy shit, I cannot endorse this, but if I don't endorse this, I've already said I hated the opposition so much, and it's so built up that these are literally the two most evil people on earth. And you try to ask them about a policy and they're like,
and I completely get that too, in a weird way, because it's like, for me, like, I know at least on our side, we're a lot more left-wing, but we're also not as left-wing as back in the Tommy Douglas days, which again is a thing that a lot of people, especially older folks, and again, the younger crowd, kind of in my age group, are more disappointed with, right? Now, I like to advocate for more left-wing things while also just kind of, chilling. Like, I love councils and conventions because that's where the actual, like, voter base or like the main base of support from a party can gather together and then steer the party. The sad thing is, though, is a lot of the times they don't follow a lot of it too.
Well, and you get like
it's a mix of strategy and following the base.
But it can work so poorly. Like, where I will say I heard a lot of good change come out of an NDP conference. I've also then heard that Danielle Smith only got 53% of support and now gets to run a province because they're
44.
44. Oh, I hope they're all over their entire base. But it is sad to say that, you know what, yes, that is their most dedicated base, but their dedicated base is based in self-interest and not the interest of society as a whole. Like, when socialist is the worst thing you can call somebody, and I'm like, okay,
thank you for the compliment.
Sure, the vulnerable are taken care of.
Thank you for the compliment.
I'm
I'm
because
sure
because the knowledge just isn't there. They've been taught to hate and not to evaluate, and that is sad.
I think the term I like a lot better is just progressive. Like, it's a good all-encompassing term.
Yeah. You know what? I guess if nothing is important, it's all important. And when you do have so many things that are important, it just goes to show that nobody's getting anything done in 4 years. Like, do not tell me nothing is getting done in 4 years. And even if you put all the people who believed in I'm a firm believer in universal support. So slightly adjacent to universal income. Yes, everybody should have a roof over your head. Everybody should have food. Everybody should be afford to live in a way that your basic need, like hierarchy of needs, baby. Your bottom layer should be supplied to you. I'm not even kidding. It should be, you should never have to question where your food is coming from if you have a safe place to stay, if you are able to, exist in a community and live, because then you'll be concerned about your thriving. Now, I've ended up in all out crazy matches with people who are super close to me and awesome, and we get along. But because, and here's where I run and duck and hide for cover sometimes, I said it's not all about dollars, it's about services and access to services and dollars as well. Because to throw money at a problem, in my opinion, doesn't solve 100%. There's more to it. You're going further up the river to see why people are falling in. Is it because, I don't have access to an injection site and therefore I am overdosing once a week? So no wonder I can't hold a job. Not only do I not have a house, I don't, I could die. Like it's so much more fundamental than that. But do I think that universal basic income would be the best and quickest band-aid? Yes, absolutely. Because you can, to a certain extent, throw money and it will fix 80% of the problems.
And that's actually the thing too, right? Is in our current system, we would need to have massive housing building projects, sadly. And also...
No, that would increase employment. Come
on. I know, we do need that. But what I'm trying to say is we should have gotten to this point where we haven't kept up with it. Oh. Because, again, like, for example, the building I'm in, this building was built in 1965. Looks like it's been renovated maybe once, just the utilities swapped out. Or I mean the, appliances. And the thing about that is like, it's $1,000, all utilities included. That's a great deal. But it should still probably only be about $600. Like, we need to start doing rent caps on older buildings, because if they're older than a certain, thing, that building should almost be fully paid off by pretty much no matter who has it.
Oh, absolutely.
Age. Because like this building here, there's scuffs on the inside, and I didn't really complain about it just because of the price. I understand, hey, that's our market. So it's like, I'm not complaining, but at the same time, we really should be able to. But this is just the state of it.
Yeah. I think that, to your point, Chantelle, I think the biggest place where I've seen that is definitely affordable housing. Because what I see a lot of governments doing, and I'm not specifying here because I feel like it's on both sides, but I've seen government literally throw money at food banks and putting beds into shelters and building affordable housing units that are not accessible, nor are they in safe neighborhoods, and then not maintaining them. Like, why? What we're doing is, like you said, throwing money there and saying, "Oh, there we go, we've solved the problem." No,
let's go. And also with food, we need to have healthy options too, because I think food is a thing where we need.
McDonald's is cheap.
We need to have a way that it's not charity distributing it, but I would say actual government suppliers buying it up from private farmers. Because if we can do that, we can actually provide people a much better quality of food and proteins and all that kind of stuff at a cheaper price, while also making sure that the farmers have a bigger benefit, because, it's the government literally bankrolling.
And to bring this full circle, because, I'm always the one to go back to the beginning. No, but this is all of it, an extension of this performative allyship. You're like, we care about poor people. We're going to throw up this housing because it's 3 months away from an election. We love immigration and newcomers. So we're going to give 3 years of funding to this program, which connects people who are new to the country to employment for 3 years. They are throwing lots of money at a thing that is reactive when they could be spending less being proactive. But the problem is, because if I might make a comparison, in in that Sweden, Finland, Norway, Denmark, that group of countries who are completely socialist, where you got a tax rate of 50% across the board. Screw you. Everything is free and you're paying it through your taxes. Great. I am for that system, but we do not have the infrastructure to do it. The reason why they have such low costs on front and back is because the infrastructure has invested up front so they can collect in the long term. Yeah. Unfortunately, Canada as a whole, every province and in every social construct we've made has always been the population doesn't want to see us spend money, so we're not. The population freaks out when people who are vulnerable are hunted for sport or are in need. Shit, we better put money in it. Unfortunately, it's like the taxation in Alberta. Alberta needs a tax. The first person to do it is shutting down their own political career, and no one will ever have to undo it, but no one wants to take that dive. It's the same way with performative allyship in government, in companies. Nobody wants to take that up front. Yeah, this is going to cost us a lot of money up front, and we're really sorry, but it is going to provide an ROI on the end, and you have to trust us.
I would actually give, a pretty decent proposal in terms of the tax anyways, because if you want to say, hey, we'll do a tax for all the income supports, all for all the social services that provinces does, but you're also going to make it for people who make over like 40 or 50K, and it's only going to be maybe like 1 to 2%. I think that is actually pretty decent, considering the fact that we have such low taxes anyways.
No, and any sane person, quite frankly, would say that.
We
are the least tax province.
I'm not an economist. They could probably come up with a higher number than I just did there.
They even said, and this is statistically proven in Canada and in each of the provinces, if the top two people, families, tax filers spent just 2% more in tax, which to somebody who is literally the person or the corporation making the most, so they are still raking in bajillions of dollars. If we would tax them at 2%, we could fund everything that's under the Canadian social umbrella, all of it. But nobody wants to do that because they're all bought. This is, back to it doesn't matter what party you work for. If you're a politician and you're trying to get people to support you, they can be bought. It's something capitalism, right?
Yeah,
like,
to go back to a point too, on terms of being able to keep the core things, Maslow's hierarchy, food, shelter, water. Mm-hmm. In terms of income support, we get it. It's supposed to be a thing to encourage you to get back in your job. It needs to be at least $1,200 if you even want a shot at, being able to cover rent, utilities, and groceries. And I would argue $1,400 if you actually want to be, reasonable though.
Yeah, and that's in our province. Never mind the fact that between Ontario and BC, that still wouldn't get you anything.
Exactly. And then for AISH, that needs to be at a bare minimum, like $2,200, $2,300. Because what if you're a disabled person who literally cannot work at all? That 1787 is pitiable. I can't afford a vehicle or anything. I can't drive, which is good in the first place. But then you go into everything else. Some people have special diets. Some people need to, have extra money to travel around and get to appointments. It's very, very personal.
No, and that's where I've always been a proponent of that service based. Like, yeah, there are those things that you need cash for, but we do it right now for, like, say, I know it's a charity and not government funded. I have a problem with it not being government funded, but like Jumpstart, families who can't afford to put their kids in sports. They are heavily funded and heavily invested in because I think everybody knows active kids do better. Mm-hmm. Period. Like that's just a fact. And nobody disagrees that sports don't benefit children. If, again, by putting money into that early, if it was a government funded support, which I firmly believe it should be, far too many food banks and other charities exist to make up for gaps that government has just said, oh, well, it exists, so why do I have to do this? Like, it's getting people the services of food, of, some sort of recreation, good food, not just McDonald's because it costs less.
And I was actually trying to give this example. So I don't know if you were at council, I believe it was last June. but I ended up, speaking on the state of Asian, all that kind of stuff, right? And the point is like I was talking about how A should even include at least 100 or 200 extra for leisure stuff too, because I had to give an example of like, hey, I'm going a couple of days, each week here, eating just noodles or like a canned thing, just so I can afford to go out and be able to do these events, and even then I still need help, because to be able to advocate and do that kind of stuff, that still costs money. But a lot of people forego the thought that, hey, maybe adults need recreation and stuff like that too.
100%.
And yes, that may be considered somewhat more expensive hobby, but it is also a very important one because you're literally silencing people if you're not helping.
Well, and again, from an economic point of view, because it's everybody's, you can't exist unless you have an economic benefit.
Exactly.
How many heart attacks are you preventing if you pay for somebody to have access to a swimming pool or a track? Yes, like recreation centers. Now, again, locally, Leduc and Edmonton, I know have some great programs and you can take advantage of them. I don't want to knock it, but it's because they have people who absolutely 110% realize that the benefits long term far outweigh the costs up front. And can people look past the end of their nose for 5 seconds?
Yeah, well, and it's just like, again, with stuff, again, like most supports, people need makeup, people need to have transport, people need to have nice clothes, especially if they want to be taken seriously. It's like, for example, Aish, they only cover like $50 for a pair of glasses or something ridiculous like that, non-inclusive prescriptions. But the thing is, like, in any environment where you're working in an office or something, you're going to need a pair that's at least 200, because in those environments where you have other people judging you all the time, you want to be at the same level. You don't want to have like those plastic yellow glasses when you're working with other people.
No, and I mean, from my background, hell, I spend far too much time, you have to be rich to get a job. Even like I got into an argument.
Yes, it costs so much to do that.
You need to be able to get there. So you either need a car or a bus pass. You need to have, even if it's like people are like, oh, a labor job. I'm like, labor jobs are the most expensive. Have you ever been into, and I'm not gonna name names, but any place that sells CSA approved steel-toed boots and seen one for under $100? Like, you need to have those to work in a warehouse. I get it. It's standard. There are some companies who have said, we know it's stupid expensive. We'll buy your first pair. And if you quit, you owe it to us by the end of 3 months, whatever form of that. But you have to be able to get to an interview. If you have kids, God forbid, you need a place to put your kids while you go to the interview. And
I'll say for the clothes too. Like, if you're
absolutely
at a place, or if you're working at any other place that just requires an apron or a clothes outfit, you should never have to pay for that.
Black pants, I think, is probably the most popular.
Yeah, and I
think
they should just cover it. And for the steel-toed boots, I think not only should companies cover it, if you get fired or quit before the end of, I wouldn't even say
tomorrow.
I wouldn't even say fired, but maybe like quit at like a job for 3 months. Then maybe you have to pay it back. But like, the company should provide it up front, and if you work there for more than that 3 months, you should not have to pay it back.
No, and I mean, and again, there is a former employer of mine as many gripes as I might have with them. The smartest thing they ever did was introduce a policy that we are going to pay for your boots. It's dumb not to. Not only because then people are like, they forgot them, when really they don't have the money to afford them, or they, you actually use them, and God forbid the sweats wear out.
I believe if you're someone who's driving company policy too, or looking for advisors of that, first things first you should look for is, okay, how do I feel my personal life? Is that stupid? Get rid of it, make it better for everyone else. Because, for example, if you want to get like a coffee machine in the office because you like coffee, well, that's a good assumption to say, hey, that might boost morale for everybody else too.
What I was gonna say is, I think the interesting thing about public education, or my experience with public education, we're always told about, and especially having a father who grew up in the state, I am always told about how, they never talk about how they treated Black people, or how they uh, handled slavery in the state. So, when I was in school, I was brought up thinking, oh, so Canada is great. We haven't done any of that kind of stuff.
we may have less sins,
to the
but we still
natives
have
and
the
to
sins.
the people of color around us. And then I got to grade 10, yes, grade 10, when I learned about residential school, and my jaw fell on the floor, and I don't think I've been able to get it back up.
No, I am markedly older than both of you, and I adore you
I
both in your youth. But but that's I never in school was never mentioned in my entire, even through university. Residential schools were not a thing that was brought up. It was something I read about, I think, in my 20s.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, I know, a long time ago in a land far, far away. So old am I that it's ancient history now. But it wasn't, and to Laura's point and your point, Mike, if you weren't told about it, did it really exist? Like the number of people who say such and such doesn't exist.
But no,
that's
the
nobody told you.
thing, right? Is I was a bit more critical in that high school is actually quite easy for me because like I spent my time just being critical at everything I was doing, and that really helped. But like most students going through it, if they didn't hear about it, they would not know anything about it, and that's actually why I liked helping out other students in the class, and I usually have people just come to me for help.
Oh, Laura, you're younger than me, and obviously younger than Chantelle. But
Everybody's younger than me.
I know. Did you you're actually like a million years old. But did you, Laura, learn about residential school?
Yeah, so I kind of learned about it a couple of times before, but like not directly in school, just from talking with a teacher that was, cared about the issue, right? And
Okay.
when I went into grade 12, we did have an Aboriginal Studies class, but did it go the most in depth into a lot of stuff? No, not really. In fact, I would argue a better, like, those classes are amazing, but like we should really try to refocus our education and be like, hey, maybe a quarter of whatever our social studies and history education courses are, maybe about a quarter of that should be dedicated to the people who are indigenous to these lands. It's kind of like how Sex said, how 1/3 of it should be queer and trans stuff, because that kind of relates a bit more percentage wise to actual communities.
Yeah,
I think also disability as well.
Disability too, completely for sure. In terms of like the comm classes, like those ones you take to learn. I just think that's probably where that would fit in best.
Might I get angry at you guys? Like, how are you not then just, it doesn't seem real world to me. Like I look at my kids' education of residential schools. Yeah, they're talking about it, but only because like 2 years ago was when it all blew up.
Well, no, and like
and now his 11-year-old self is knowledgeable, but only to a certain extent. And I guess
again,
the changes I see
about that too. Like
I've known about I see in the school system where we're still. No, I don't think it is as bad. Again, low ass bar. When I was in elementary school, which, okay, I'm a 43-year-old woman, if we want to put my age out on the table. When I was in elementary school, the children with disabilities, if they were non-obstructive enough for them to be ignored in the class, they were put into class with their peers. If it was obstructive to a class, that is, they needed any extra assistance, there was no such thing as EAs, they were put into a class for children with disabilities. So there was an outright like segregation.
Oh, and actually have that in Swift Current still. So they actually have special ed classes. Now I know we have that in every high school, but that's where they put all the disruptive people.
And again, like I see in my child's class that there is an EA. There are individuals who require EAs, and those EAs exist based on, again, the funding that is provided for individual children on IPEs, etc. I still think that's, if we can't model in the earliest years how we can be inclusive to fill in the blank, any sort of barrier, but if we can't actually grow up in a system that acknowledges it, for one, that actually finds ways to make things work, how is it ever going to happen? what I hope is that there's been, I guess the slow crawling snail is making its way through. And so, as we realize that in order to reach like health regulations, we must have fire alarms that also blink in case you can't hear the fire alarm, that more of that just becomes mainstream. Because we live it. So, I mean, again, yay, my kid acknowledges that there are some kids in his class who have like an extra EA. Whether why the EA exists has been disclosed or not, and in what sort of fashion has varied, because privacy, and it shouldn't fucking matter. But it's one of those things that I'm like, why? We wonder why we have so many issues now with performative shit of us waving a flag, yay, I'm a good person. Because it's just being that decent human being inclusive hasn't existed in
it hasn't
at least 30 years.
And it hasn't existed for so long, and it only really started existing when the minority of people who supported these reforms started becoming a majority. And now, for example, in the US, we have a situation where, well, it was always a majority who was against, slavery and all that kind of stuff. But the point is that it still got to the point where that kind of stuff happened, kind of like with all the trans hate and stuff that's going on. And now the laws against, even drag shows. Like, I don't even go to drag shows. I don't understand why they're banning drag shows. Like, so you get to those areas where not only are they allergic to equity and inclusion, and making sure that everybody is equal in a given situation, but to the point that we're now going against the others, which is a very bad turn of events, considering that's been done in the past to varying degrees by many different countries.
Well, it's from that White Fragility book. It's the theory of the woman who wrote that is that people are just so scared of losing what is normal for them that their way is excluding everything that would possibly threaten that, whether it's a real threat or a thought up threat, or
but by their logic, I get to defend myself with whatever weapon, the exact replica of whatever weapon they have when they come after me.
No, hey.
It's like, hey, you want a duel? We're both defending ourselves here.
I think too, part of the problem is what the media has taught us about certain groups in the past, and also what you learn in school about certain groups. I'll give an example. So I took 4 years of psychology when I was in high school.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's actually so cool. We didn't even have that.
I loved my psychology teacher. He was the greatest guy in the world. But what the textbooks taught you was people with schizophrenia are horrifyingly scary people that you want to stay away from because they will attack you. That is what the textbook said. So I spent years and years and years fearing for my life if I was ever around somebody with schizophrenia. I now know 2 or 3 people with schizophrenia, and they are some of the nicest people in the world.
Exactly. And the problem is, a lot of people take into account schizophrenia left untreated. If it's treated, it's usually completely fine.
Yeah, and also, to that same point, I think, and I mean, Laura, I'm sure you've seen this stuff too on TV, like in the past. What they would show is drag. So did you ever watch Friends? No?
I actually never
She's too
Friends
young.
or many of those shows. But what I do know is that a lot of those old shows were very offensive. Like, MASH, they got a dude just to dress up in a dress to be called mentally unstable.
But in Friends, basically Chandler's dad did drag. He was, he did drag shows. I hope I'm using the right.
My dad did drag. He dressed up in drag for a Halloween costume, but he's so conservative, and it was so bad.
Yeah, but it's things like that, and then how they would portray people that are mentally ill. Like, you see somebody walking down the street and they're acting crazy. Like, And all of these messages, and like if you look at a show like Flynn, and I plan to do a video on this one day, but if you look at a TV show like Flynn that is still popular today, people are still watching, and you look at the transphobia, the homophobia, even the toxic masculinity, if you look at Lost Ella, um, is it's all horrific, and it's all sending these messages of like, you need to be terrified of these people. Don't go near them.
Yeah, no, and that's a huge problem. Is a lot of media in the U.S., Canada, mainly, has actually always traditionally been conservative, and so they play into a lot of the larger conservative voter base, right? That's why, like, how in the U.S. for Sailor Moon, for example, you had you have Sailor, Sailor Neptune and Uranus. I think they kiss, and they call them cousins when they're actually just lesbian, and that's a very messed up thing. Or you also have situations where, for example, we have whole TV shows here in Canada that include a simple kiss, like 16, which is a show from Teletoon, about a group of teens in a mall. And that's completely banned in the US just because it had a kiss, and that was deemed inappropriate.
History is always written by the people in power, man. Like, and it will change. And it's one of the greatest.
I just brought that example up because I had a person who I know who literally never heard of the show, and they're from America. And that explains
oh, yeah, because they've just never heard it because it's banned there. But if you think, like, 1950s, if a woman was sexually repressed and needed an orgasm, it was called hysteria. And you would literally go to the doctor, and the doctor would take a vibrator and relieve you of your hysteria. But then you go through a process of the way sexuality in women is determined. This is a whole other podcast.
Oh, also, speaking of vibrators, Ted Cruz, the devil, he tried to ban vibrators and dildos over in Texas.
But that is that step. That is that all of a sudden it was a doctor's duty to relieve these women. Then all of a sudden they realized, holy shit, what's really going on is they're lining up at the doctor's office to get off.
So is this where the doctor kink came from?
I think so. And so now, even if you look, and again, it's always how when they realize that the construct that they've set up isn't working for what they wanted it to, you go from that to, again, any sort of toys for women were sold in the same back when there were videos. Laura, once upon a time there were VHS tapes.
Mm-hmm,
we used to watch tapes.
Yeah, and there's also still DVD stores.
Yes,
I one, but it's sketchy areas.
Yeah, but then that was the only place you could get a toy to satisfy this hysteria, which was still a bad thing.
Probably would have been a crappy toy too.
Probably. And bring ourselves forward to, and I mean, I wouldn't call this like sexual acceptance, but you can go into Shoppers Drug Mart now, and although it's in very plain packaging with zero instructions inside, Durex, who God forbid would sell you a condom, can now sell you nothing bigger than what fits in like this size of box. So there's only very few things that
I was going to say too, right, is like, we live in a modern day and age where if I want, I can get same day shipping on a dildo or a vibrator. And
sweetheart, I sell them as my like third side,
and I just don't give a fuck about what other people say.
Yeah, no, and but even it's funny in the lineup of women's wellness things that I sell, that we still promote discreet packaging. Man alive, unwrap that thing, stick it to my front door, and put up a sign-up list. Like, what I do is my business, and I don't know what to tell you. There's still so much tied up in politics and in religion of these things that are based on control. And again, when they decide to make it an issue, it is only ever
like
what's sexy and pretty.
Down in the US too, right? Is like we don't know what they're gonna do up here, since we also have them, like many conservative MLAs and MPs, openly saying they're actually fine with abortion bans, and that is really disturbing. So it's kind of sad to see all of this.
Say that same men who have paid for one in the States for their mistresses. It's all
Well, and I was actually going to say too, right? I feel that if you're in a state that requires that, I think the legislature should just think it through. Well, if this person is a previous offender, why don't you just tie their, like give them a vasectomy? Like if they've raped people before, they're not allowed to have kids ever.
You know what?
Like
Kids, let's take I saw this on Facebook today and my heart jumped a little bit. Let us take our lessons from the Bible.
Mhm.
What does Jesus say? If you can't keep your eyes off a woman, gouge your fucking eyes out. Take them out. It's your fault. What do you do if you can't keep your wandering hands off a beautiful woman? Cut your fucking hand off. It's not her problem. It's yours. But yet I don't see that all over.
Well, exactly.
Oh, Christian, like.
Because in both of those sentences, it's not going to be a problem if both people are interested.
No, right?
Laura, thank you so much for being here. Is there anything that you want to plug before you go?
Not a political podcast, but please vote for Rachel in May and be gay. Don't do crime.
Yeah, if you live in Alberta.
If you live in Alberta, yes.
We don't know other Rachels. We don't endorse other Rachels. If there's a Rachel that is a douchebag in your community, do not vote for them.
And also, another thing in addition to supporting Rachel, also make sure to push the party even further so that we can get good policies for everybody and that don't benefit mainly corporations.
Amazing. So, are you wanting to like plug a Twitter handle or anything?
Well, yeah, for my Twitter, I guess. Yeah, I just kind of plugged that stuff. But yeah, my Twitter handle is Laurie Alberta. So LAU, RIE, Alberta. And then for my Instagram, that is Laura_Penner AB. And that's all my social stuff.
And all of that will also be in the description below. So thank you everybody for joining us. Chantelle, did you have any final words?
God help us all. No, no, as always, I am super thankful for all the conversation, all the awesomeness that transpires out of this podcast. Go us.
Okay, well, thank you so much for having me on. This was actually my first ever podcast experience.
Well, you did amazing, and we were very happy to have you with us. Next month, we will have NDP MLA Lauren Dack. We are not a political podcast.
We're not a political podcast.
I
Please
just said that.
Please don't unsubscribe. I promise you we will have other guests as well. But there's also, as Laura pointed out, a election in May. And I think that it might be the most important election of our lifetime. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We will see you in the next one.